Welcome to the All Things Admin Pro Training Series. My name is Julie Perrine. I'm the founder and CEO of All Things Admin, and we are delighted to have you joining us for this month's presentation, Becoming a Champion of Change. Change is one of those things that is virtually inevitable, but as much as we may resist it, without it, we'd probably still be using rotary phones and manual typewriters. And change tends to get a bad rap. Yet it can be a very positive thing. And to survive in business today, every member of the team, especially administrative professionals, must learn to identify, understand, and respond to change in a productive and profitable way. But to thrive, you have to become a champion of change. So let's take a look at what change is today, how change occurs, and what you can do to become a champion of change within your company. If we think about what change really is, let's spend a couple seconds reasoning through this. Is all change bad? Is all change good? Does change necessarily have to have emotion attached to it? Is it sometimes the way change is led in our organizations, and especially at work, that causes it to get a bad rap? Maybe if there was better communication, more buy-in from the beginning, everybody understanding the reason for the change in the first place, would that help change be received more positively? Perhaps. And we'll talk about some of these things today. But if we just look at change as an emotionless, plain term, what is change? Well, when I think of change, the first thing I think of is seasons and gardening and plants and flowers growing and the weather. I don't tend to be one of those people who gets too worked up about changes in the seasons or changes in the weather. It's just part of life. And so I tend to put that approach on other changes in my life or try to use that analogy. We know inevitably things are going to keep cycling through, and even if things transition into something that's not as enjoyable for us, it's temporary. It may be longer a period of time than we wish it were, but typically, again, something's going to shift or change and put us into a different position to work through whatever's next. I also like to think about family. You know, we have a lot of things in our life that change with getting married, with new babies, with people getting older, losing family members, even things in our personal lives, getting a new job, getting a new car, selling a house, buying a house. All of these things are changes. And a lot of these have some very happy and positive things associated with them. So that also tells me that not all change is bad. And when we look at technology, if you look around you, it's not hard to find the latest innovations in software and electronic devices, even office furniture. But as innovative as those things may be when they were first purchased or implemented, they can quickly become obsolete because another idea or a new and improved version inevitably is going to follow, and that results in the next latest and greatest thing that everyone certainly thinks they have to have. If you think about our smartphones, I mean, they're outdated within hours of purchasing them sometimes. And recently I read that a college degree can become obsolete within 18 months now. And that is stunning to me because you put 4 or 5 years of effort into getting this degree, and in a year and a half, it can be out of date if you aren't doing things to stay connected to your profession or career of choice and continue to build upon those skills and abilities and things that you built the foundation for, but have to keep building on to stay current and on the cutting edge of where you're at. So that's why we as professionals have to find proactive and productive ways to manage and champion change, because it's the only way for us to stay on top of our game and to stay on that cutting edge. And if we don't, we'll become as obsolete as the manual typewriter. So as a basic definition of change, here's what we've got. It's to make or become different, transform, to move from one to another, to give up something in exchange for something else, to remove and replace it with another of the same kind. And if you look at these just as basic and broad definitions, there isn't necessarily a negative or positive associated with these. It's just different. It's a change. So that tells me there's an opportunity for us to make some shifts in how we think about change so that it doesn't get such a bad rap in the overall scheme of how we interact with it on a day-to-day basis, especially in our work, but also in our personal lives. If you think about the process of how a butterfly develops, from egg to butterfly, the process is weather dependent. It is also dependent upon the climate and the temperature and the things that are going on in that particular area. It can take about 4 weeks in the peak of summer or warmer climates. The egg takes about 5 to 10 days. The larva and the pupa phase takes about 10 to 14 days. And depending on the season and the temperature and the part of the world that you live in, it can take longer, or sometimes it can be condensed into a little bit shorter period. And the process slows down in cool weather. But when that pupa is ready to hatch, the shell becomes transparent, and you begin to see the dark colors of the butterfly wings that are folded up inside visible through that. And when it breaks free from that shell, we have this beautiful butterfly. And this change cycle is certainly a more condensed one. If you figure from start to finish, it may take about a month or so for this process to occur. But at various stages, it doesn't always look as beautiful and pretty as what the end result is. And so I like to think about, again, nature and some of the things that happen in nature that we just kind of take for granted, like, yeah, that's just the way it goes, and that's the way it happens, and that's the way it occurs, so we just have to wait for it. But yet we aren't quite so patient with those changes in our work and in the transitions and things that happen in our offices. If you look at the example then of a plant or a tree, that cycle takes a while longer. Getting the seed to sprout, getting roots established and foliage growing, and with fruit trees in particular, you may have to wait a few years before it actually produces fruit that you can eat. And even so, during that time, you still have to tend to it and prune it and nurture it and water it and fertilize it and keep it growing until it becomes fully established and fruit producing. So this process, certainly if you compare the two, one is a much shorter cycle, one is a much longer cycle, but they still have the same types of phases and components to the overall cycle of going from concept to final result. And I love this quote. I think sums it up really awesomely. For a seed to achieve its greatest expression, it must come completely undone. The shell cracks, its insides come out, and everything changes. To someone who doesn't understand growth, it would look like complete destruction. So in nature, we come to accept the timeliness, the timelines, and the life cycles of these changes, plants, animals, seasons, weather, all of these things. Yet for some reason, we are a lot less patient with the process of growth and change in our personal and professional lives. And many times, they have a predictable cycle to them as well if we analyze things a little bit more closely. And so we're going to spend some time doing that today and give you a roadmap for how to approach change in your personal life, in your professional life, and in the support role you play on the teams and projects that you're supporting. In order to become a champion of change, the first thing that has to shift is your mindset. In Dr. Carol Dweck's book, Mindset, she identifies two primary mindsets, the growth mindset and the fixed mindset. And when I was researching for my book, The Innovative Admin, I realized that those were the perfect starting point for helping assistants understand how to make the shift into becoming more innovative in how they take ideas and implement them in the office space where they work and for the teams they support. And so I've renamed them slightly. I refer to the growth mindset as the innovation mindset and the fixed mindset as the status quo mindset. And the fixed mindset believes that you're static, or that your intelligence is static, your qualities are carved in stone, and it creates this urgency for you to prove yourself over and over. It leads to a desire to look smart, and therefore a tendency to avoid challenges, get defensive, and give up easily when obstacles appear. Many times people who are stuck in the status quo or the fixed mindset see effort as fruitless. They ignore useful feedback, feel threatened by the success of others, and as a result, a person with this mindset may plateau early and achieve less than his or her full potential. The innovation mindset, or the growth mindset, however, believes that the hand you're dealt is just the starting point for development. Intelligence can be developed, which leads to a desire to learn, and therefore a tendency to embrace challenges and change, persist in the face of obstacles, use effort as the path to mastery, learn from criticism, find lessons and inspiration in the success of others, and as a result, they reach ever higher levels of achievement. It's based on the belief that your basic qualities are things you can cultivate through your efforts, and although people may differ in every way, with talents, personality, aptitudes, interests, etc., everyone can change and grow through application and experience. So let's examine what status quo and innovation thinking might sound like. You're probably quite familiar with status quo thinking because I think we've all probably experienced it or maybe even been guilty of it here or there over the course of interactions we've had with various things that are occurring in our environment. So see if any of these sound familiar to you. That's the way we've always done it. A great example of status quo thinking. I would never use that skill in my current position, so I'm not even going to put the effort into trying to get that figured out. I'm planning to retire in a year, 2 years, 3 years, so I'll be out of here before I need to get that technology figured out or before social media is anything I need to bother looking into or before I need to master this new piece of technology. I spoke at a conference in Redmond, Washington a couple of years ago, and they had this fantastic evening of fun and social plan that included a cork and canvas mini event. We were all going to learn how to paint a little 6-inch square canvas. So I was excited to join in because I've never painted anything in my life, and I thought, well, this is a great experience or an opportunity for me to maybe, I don't know, see if I have some skills or abilities here, maybe something I should be pursuing, who knows. But it was amazing to listen to people as they sat down and prepared to learn how to paint. I couldn't believe the things these people were saying, even before they tried it, even before the instructor had given us a single bit of instruction on how to get started. People were making all these comments. I'm not creative. I have no artistic ability. This is going to be such a waste of time. Oh, this is a real joke. It's a good thing they've given us wine because that's the only way I'll get through this. I mean, it was just all this, I can't do it. I have no skills and abilities, and they hadn't even tried yet. And by the time we were done, about 30 minutes later, this was the result from my particular group. This is what we had created. Now, if I asked you to pick the paintings that the instructor did versus the ones that the rest of us did, which ones would you pick? There's some pretty good ones on there. In fact, there were some that I liked better than the instructors by the time it was done. And I'll let you take a look at this for a couple seconds here, as I also want to point out the one on the bottom center. This particular person sat down at the table, never once looked up at the instructor to make eye contact with her, and basically had the attitude of, this is a total waste of time, I'm never going to be able to do it, and just started doing their own thing without even putting some effort into seeing what would happen if they tried what we were being taught. Now, the 3 that the instructor did are in the upper right corner. Mine happens to be the one in the top center, right next to that yellow box and the blue one there. I was so excited that it turned out looking anything reasonable, like a flower that we were trying to paint. And I actually have this hanging in my office because it was a great visual and reminder for me, and it is on a daily basis, every time I see it hanging on my filing cabinet, that sometimes we have to be willing to try some new things and work through some of the change processes that we don't necessarily invite in, but that are presented to us. And I read somewhere, I think it was an Inc. magazine article, that creativity comes from habit, not talent. So that indicates that if you want to become more creative, or you want to get better at thinking more innovatively, or you want to get better at change, you've got to be practicing these skills in the first place. And so this was an excellent activity for doing that for us. So what does innovative thinking sound like? Well, here are a few ways that that might come across depending on the topics that we've already been looking at here. I have no idea how social media works, so I'm attending some webinars to get it figured out, and I've created my LinkedIn profile to get my feet wet and give it a try on a professional network first. I'm developing new skills to add to my resume by volunteering, because I know that no job is permanent in this day and age, and the skills that are required for my current job may not be enough for what I need to do next. So I'm taking the opportunity to beef up my resume with some volunteer work on evenings or weekends. I'd like to transition into marketing, so I've enrolled in some online courses, and I'm taking one class at a time for the next 2 or 3 years until I can finish my bachelor's degree or work towards the next phase of the educational level I'd like to achieve. I don't know what changes are coming next, so I'm doing everything I can to prepare by fill in the blank. Maybe you're learning HTML and some basic WordPress skills so you can edit the internet posts that you load for your team on the website. This is what innovative thinking sounds like. And when you shift to this mindset, it puts you in such a different space for how you think about change in the first place, and you'll find that you start shifting into the mindset of the good ideas that you have suddenly become, how do I implement these, instead of putting up with things that perhaps in the past you just didn't feel like were worth the effort to make the suggestions or to pursue pushing that change through to come out to hopefully a better place for implementing the ideas that you have. So making the mindset shift is the first step. Finding ways to adapt to change, even some changes that you may not be so excited about, is the next step. And sometimes it requires some research and collaboration and tapping into our networks to figure things out. And sometimes we have to get creative when it comes to adapting to change. And I'll share kind of a fun example of that with you. I have enjoyed my smartphones from the very first one I was able to purchase a few years ago. But this is a technology that I'm not entirely sure all of the bugs have been worked out of yet. And one of the bugs that I do not love about the new smartphones that many of us carry with us 24/7 is the face sensing technology. It doesn't always cooperate the way you intend it to. And I don't know about you, but I have had troubles ongoing with my phones with cutting people off. I try to keep my phone in one spot, but sometimes I'm moving it back and forth, or just the natural motions of being excited when you're talking, I guess. And it drove me crazy when I got my first phone. It was my #1 complaint. And I hated for people to call me for business calls on my cell phone because I was always afraid I was going to cut them off. Well, I've never had that trouble when I'm using the handset on my regular phone, and I'm sure most of you probably haven't either. So what would happen if you took this old technology and made it compatible with your new technology. It might work something like this. And let me tell you, I have yet to disconnect someone from a call when I use this little innovation. And I have 3 of them, one in my desk drawer, one in my travel bag, and one in my glove box of my car. Now, I don't talk and drive, but when I'm out and about and I need to do a quick call or have a meeting from my car, this is fabulous. Plus, I love the visual of people's faces when they walk by my car and see me talking on this. It's absolutely hilarious. But I read somewhere that innovation is only about 10% new. And if you look at all the latest and greatest new devices or gadgets that come out, how different are they really from the previous ones? Now, every now and again, we get something that's totally new and out of the box from the last design. But most of the things that we're looking at or calling innovative are only about 10% different or new and improved from the previous version. And if you think about that in terms of change that you're dealing with at the office, what percentage of change is it really in the overall scheme of things? And if you think about changes that you'd like to make at the office, many times they aren't a major overhaul. It's just a few percentage points of improvement, whether it's your idea or your boss's idea or a software upgrade or a shift in how you manage projects or whatever it is. In some cases, changes are more substantial than others. Certainly, if there's a downsizing or a merger or an acquisition, there can be a lot of changes and all of them happening at once. But in a lot of cases, the change is manageable. It's just the emotion that we attach to it and the way we approach it that makes it feel bigger, uglier, or worse than it may really be. And this particular technology change, I was able to use this tool, and actually I still use it from time to time. I have another headset now with earbuds that I can make work, but those don't stay in my ears as well as I want them to, and I really just prefer to be able to put a handset on my shoulder and talk like I do when I'm at my desk. So there are ways sometimes to take a change and find a way to adapt to it, even if it wasn't exactly as awesome or worked as efficiently as the previous tool you were using. And so that's a point I want to draw out here as well. Sometimes we can find some productive workarounds that still accomplish the same goal. And ultimately now, I would not want to go back to the first cell phone I had. I like being able to be connected to people and have it be as effective and efficient as it is with my smartphone. So in that respect, change and innovation go hand in hand. And if you think about what innovation is, it's a new way of thinking about and doing things. It's how we take common, ordinary things and make them better. It's positive change and improvement, taking action, producing results, and implementing. Now, when you look at the definition of innovation, this has a very positive, proactive, take charge approach to it. And this is why I like to talk about mindset first, because if we can shift from thinking more in that maintaining the status quo mindset into the innovation mindset, this is where we start to propel ourselves into in our daily thinking about the challenges and opportunities that are presented to us. As the innovative admin, you aren't just championing change, you're helping lead it. What do I mean by that? Well, let's define who the innovative admin is. The innovative admin is an administrative professional who introduces, creates, or applies new or renewed ideas or methods of doing things to the office environment. This is someone who is actively doing, seeking, and implementing, not someone who's simply coming up with ideas or maintaining the status quo. What do you notice about the words in green? Doing, seeking, implementing. This person is taking action. And change requires leaders and members of the team to take action. To become a champion of change, you have to know what the roadmap looks like so you aren't so taken aback by the detours you encounter along the way. And this is part of the managing process of dealing with change. Have any of you ever had a plan on paper that didn't go exactly as planned? We typically map something out. We're very direct in our step-by-step process of getting from point A to point B as efficiently as possible. And on paper, it looks great. But has the actual course sometimes turned out to not be quite so direct in its completion? What I love about this image is what happened is actually more artistic and beautiful than what they had planned. And the actual course sometimes turns out better than you initially intended. And sometimes those detours and roadblocks teach us something or give us additional insight that in the end makes the project work better or turn out better or be more successful. Not always, but I look at my challenges and roadblocks now as a learning opportunity. I don't always see them that way the first instant they show up, but I try to get my mindset shifted as quickly as I can to what am I supposed to learn from this? How quickly can I learn it, and how fast can I get back on track to heading to the ultimate goal or destination that I am headed to? I've included this in your handout because I love this visual of the change process. Found it somewhere online. I don't even remember where. I wish I could find it again so I could give proper credit where credit is due here. And you've probably seen this change process diagram before in various formats. But in order to shift the status quo, you have to go through a change process. It's not always pretty. In fact, a lot of times it's quite chaotic. But when you emerge on the other side, it becomes the new normal until the next change. So the old status quo starts at one spot, and the new status quo ends at a higher level of performance in a better spot, but then it becomes the old status quo at some point, and then you have to continue going through this process again and again. It's not coincidental that it mirrors the innovation mindset curve. When I was researching for my book, I came across Mike Dougherty's innovation mindset model, and it's a fantastic model for understanding what happens when you go through the innovation development process, and it also mirrors the change process. So I want to take you step by step through this innovation mindset model because I view this as my roadmap for navigating change. And as administrative professionals, supporting the projects and teams and initiatives that you support, I think this is going to be helpful for you to be able to pinpoint and see where your team is at in some of these phases of their change process or their product development or their new thing they're trying to put together for whether internal use or for external customer sales and marketing. So this can give you insight into, okay, this is where we're at in the process. We just need to push through the bottom of the curve because we're just about there. Or, okay, here's why we're struggling because we're stuck in this phase right here. How do we get the right people or resources or other expertise involved to help us get to the next phase of this? So the model starts with the dreaming phase. This is where your idea is born, you do your research, you're brainstorming, your team members or people who are involved, especially those who are in the brainstorming phase of it, are building energy and excitement around the concept. And for me, I'll share a personal example of this. It was in writing my first book. I had thought, I helped others get published. I can certainly do this too. And so you start to map out your plan of action and you dive in. Everything looks great at this phase of the process. But the second phase of the process is the doubting phase. And this part inevitably happens in almost every project. So you get into the project, and then you start asking questions like, well, is this idea really good enough to make it happen? Is it really going to work the way we think it is supposed to? There are other demands on your time. You've got other competing things trying to work at the same time, and for me, I had to be disciplined about working on my book. Other work projects kept interfering with getting my book written. It required discipline to sit and write consistently. And I had a good friend that was diagnosed with mesothelioma cancer around the same time. And I was struggling. My thoughts were with her and struggling to think about what she was going through and trying to get my own stuff done. And I just really began to wonder, can I even do this? And there's so much to do to sometimes take our ideas from concept to complete that it's easy to get overwhelmed. And I think sometimes that's what also happens at this phase. I personally had some health issues that were distracting me as well. And then for me, I started to wonder, is it really good enough to publish? Is anyone going to read it? Don't people already know this stuff? And I could have stopped here, but thankfully I didn't. And I surrounded myself with some amazing team members on my own team, as well as my network outside of my company. And they really helped get me through this stage and move on to the next phase. But I love this quote: inaction breeds doubt and fear. Action breeds confidence and courage. If you want to conquer fear, don't sit at home and think about it. Go out and get busy. The best way to overcome the doubting phase is to take action. Sometimes you don't know what's going to work until you try some things. And so you have to push through that, get the right people surrounding you to help you, and move into phase 3. And this is the phase that, again, isn't quite so enjoyable. You'll notice this doubting and quitting. You're like on a downward flow here. Like you feel like you're about to hit rock bottom when you get to the bottom of the curve here, for a reason, because this is not an enjoyable part of it. This is where in the change process, there's chaos and things start breaking and things don't work as efficiently as you thought they were going to, or one of the tools that you were planning to implement to make this happen isn't working the way it was supposed to. I mean, it's just it feels like it's one thing after another. And so quitting or persevering is the third phase. And I'll read this section right from my book, because this is the stage that Mike says truly separates innovators from dreamers. Am I willing to keep trying different strategies to make my idea happen if I believe deep in my gut the idea still has potential, or do I quit? Sometimes quitting simply means the idea isn't ready yet. Its time may come further down the road, or I may determine the idea wasn't as good as I originally thought it was. If I'm not making any progress and I feel like I'm beating my head against a wall, the best action may be to quit working on it for a while, give myself a chance to work on something different, and then come back to it. And sometimes that happens with our projects, both personal and professional. We get to a point where we realize this is just not happening. I'm throwing time and money at this, and I'm getting nowhere. It may be time to press pause on it and come back to it later, or figure out who else I need to get involved to make it happen. But in some cases, it's just a matter of continuing to enlist the right people or the right resources so that you can persevere through it and push through the bottom of the curve. This has become an analogy my husband and I use all the time at home now too, and especially when we're talking about work projects or challenges that we're dealing with. And my husband has said to me countless times since we introduced this model into our conversation, are you just at the bottom of the curve and you need a little help and encouragement pushing through? And that is just a reset for me. Every single time he says that, I'm like, you know what? He's probably right. What do I need to do? And so when I was writing my book, my friend Kathy was having her battle with cancer, and one of the things that really struck me at this phase and helped me push through the bottom of the innovation curve was she was one of the most intelligent, innovative, smart, sharp administrative professionals I had ever worked with. And I just could not imagine all of the knowledge and skills that she had dying with her. And I wished beyond my wildest hope that somehow I could have gotten it out of her and onto paper so that I could refer to it and benefit from it, even if it only helped me. And I knew it would help a lot more people than that, because I'd be sharing it with other people too. And as I thought about her, and then I looked at what I was trying to accomplish with writing this book, I didn't want that to happen to me. And so if I could help just one person, I had to finish my book. And so I enlisted some new accountability partners. I did several things to eliminate distractions in my environment. And I put that big picture, the big vision in front of me to keep me motivated, because not everyone was doing some of the things that I was talking about in my book. I knew my book could help them, but not if I never finished it. And so that was how I got through the bottom of the curve into the next phase, which is the transforming phase. Now, I'll be the first to tell you, the change process, the innovation process, product development processes, they are not pretty or glamorous. There is a lot of junk that has to sometimes rise to the top to either be let go or changed in order to make steps where you can move forward. And you realize that the journey you're on is always going to have these peaks and valleys if you're truly trying to accomplish something in your life and career. So for me, this is par for the course. But when you invest in the effort to clear space, new things and better things follow. And as you begin to share it with others, you see the immediate results that it's having, and you get even more excited to truly, polish it up and prepare it for completion and for presenting it to everybody as, okay, here's the new and improved version of how we're going to do this, or the tool we're going to use, or the product that we've created or developed for our customers and our clients. And if you remember my question I asked here a few minutes ago, if it could help only one person, would it be worth doing? Well, I had two huge surprises that I did not anticipate that answered this question for me with a resounding yes. And the first one was my husband. He's an English major and a paralegal by education and profession. So I asked him to help me proof my book when it was finished. And he won't proof without a red pen. So I handed him the manuscript and the pen. And I had this certain level of intrepidation because I was just certain this thing was going to come back marked up and I'd have to start over. And when I got it back, I was actually pretty stunned. I looked through it and I'm like, did you even proof this? Are you sure? Because there was not nearly the amount of red in the margins that I anticipated. And it had some notes that when I started reading them, some of them were grammar and punctuation notes, but what shocked me the most was that my husband had kept writing notes in the margins about what he wanted to do or implement or changes in specific things in his own career that he wanted to address as a result of what he was reading. That was stunning and incredible to me because I never anticipated that my book would help my husband as that one person. And then I got a letter from another administrative professional from Africa. And in her letter, she shared with me literally some things that had completely transformed the trajectory of her career and ultimately her life with her children as a result of reading my book. And let me just say, that was when the transformation of pursuing this project and seeing it through to completion happened for me as well. And one last thing I'll share here on the transforming phase, I was just about to go to print with my book when I shared my book cover with my new business coach, who was a 16-time published author, had a lot of experience in publishing, a lot of experience in media and the press. And she looked at my book cover and she said, "It's not too late to change this, is it?" And I about dropped my phone. I was like, well, I guess at this point we can still change it because it hasn't gone to print yet, but I was hoping to approve it like this week and be done with this thing, finally. And she said, "This looks like a report cover." She's like, "You need a book cover." So I said, well, what do you recommend? So she mocked up on a sheet of paper what she recommended instead, and I had my designer take another pass at it. And this is what we ended up with as a result. Now, the overall colors and images and concepts, very similar. But when we talked about change and innovation and how much of it, percentage-wise, is it really changing? I don't know, is it 15, 20, 25% change from what the first one was? But so much better and so much worth the wait. And I was so glad that she created that detour in my innovation cycle so that I could get it right. And that's the other thing about change. Sometimes these detours and challenges and delays and roadblocks are frustrating and aggravating as they can possibly be in the moment. But I look back on this one as a great example of thank God that one happened. So the fifth phase then is the championing phase. And this is where you start applying this innovation adoption curve to everything you look at. Where are we at on the curve? And I can help others and encourage others because of my experience in going through this curve now multiple times. And without even realizing it, I've been going through this curve throughout my career with different things I was trying to initiate and implement for various corporate jobs I had, whether it was getting an administrative procedures binder created that then I implemented across the entire division for the companies that I worked for, whether it was implementing a new process for how we handled travel arrangements for our executives, whether it was creating a form or a process or a system for making things easier for the team I was supporting or for even admins throughout my company. This cycle is a repetitive one over and over and over again if you're doing anything that means something. And I'm here today talking to you as a champion of innovation and championing change in your career and in your work because I've pushed through this curve over and over and over again. And this is how you spread this mindset and culture through your team and your department and your company. As one single person on that team, you can make a huge difference just by understanding this and helping them see that where they're at and helping them push through to the completion. So this, if you take the innovation mindset adoption curve and you put it back to back to back to back, what does this remind you of? If you said a roller coaster, you're right. And if you feel like your work projects and even sometimes your personal life are on a nonstop roller coaster ride, then you're probably doing something right. You're trying to initiate or implement things that are going to require a few loop-de-loops and swings around that you may not have intended, but in the end, it's getting you to a better place or a new and improved version of whatever you're working on. Every activity is a process and can be improved. Now, I'm not advocating change for change's sake, but I think it's important that we look at removing the defensive guards we put up when somebody initiates or presents a change in our environment and be open to input and improvements that may come as a result of it. A few Januaries ago, change was thrust upon my friend Linda and me when we both slipped and fell on the ice. The exact same week, I fell on a Monday, she fell on a Friday, and we were both laid up with casts on our arms for the next 6 to 8 weeks. Linda worked for a small insurance firm. She was their only assistant, and they had a pretty busy office, and so she couldn't not do her job, nor could I. I was self-employed, though, at the time. And if I wasn't clocking billable hours, I wasn't making money. Linda, thankfully, was still able to make money even if she couldn't do as much work. But for me, not getting as much work done meant I couldn't clock as many billable hours and was going to adversely impact my pocketbook in a real hurry. And if you've ever tried to type with a cast on your wrist, you know that it's virtually impossible without creating a frozen shoulder issue for yourself because you have to put your arm or your elbow out almost parallel from your shoulder to get your hand at a good angle for being able to type horizontally. So Linda and I began brainstorming ways that we could overcome this new change that had been thrust upon us, and using one hand as our primary typing hand wasn't as effective as either of us needed it to be, and we still needed to stay as productive as possible. So I did some research, and I found this split ergonomic keyboard that could actually be broken completely in half. And I put the left-hand side of it on a document holder, and I kept the right-hand side flat. Technically, I could have put both sides up so that both of them were vertical, but that seemed just a little excessive. And I type by touch most of the time, but you still kind of sometimes like to be able to look down and see what's going on with the keyboard. So typed with the right hand horizontal and the left hand vertical. And an amazing thing happened. During that 2 months that I had a cast on my arm, I was more billable with a broken wrist than I had been the 2 months prior without it. And at first I was like, how is this even possible? Like, did I miscalculate my hours? Did I miscalculate my invoice? What did I do wrong here? What I realized was because I had a broken arm, my husband didn't want me driving, and so one of my clients offered for me to work from his office location every day if I wanted to, or as many days a week as it was convenient, so that I didn't have to be coming and going to meet up with clients or have appointments during the day. They could come to his office and meet me there, and that way I didn't have to drive, but I still had access to, a break room and could take my lunch and had a nice desk to work at. And what happened was I wasn't spending as much time in the car driving to and from meetings or driving to and from coffee appointments. People were coming to me, so I was spending less on coffee and meals. I was more efficient with my time because we were just having the meeting for exactly what we needed to talk about, and we weren't really socializing much before or after it. And I was working more set hours than when I was working at home and being distracted by laundry and dishes and family members stopping by and all of the other distractions that my home office environment was creating for me that I didn't even realize. And this is a great reminder for me that unanticipated events and change can be a good thing in the end if we're able to change our mindset and be willing to examine the pros and cons objectively. That broken wrist changed how I worked, and it made me more productive and efficient as an administrative professional and as a business owner. It also reminded me that change is inevitable, but growth is optional. And from that point forward, I continued working in my new and improved setup so that my business continued to grow instead of going back to the way I had done things previously. So how do we shift from resisting change to embracing it? For me, I look back at some of the changes I've experienced throughout my career, and most of them have eventually landed me in a better place. I've added to my skills, I've expanded my professional network, I've taken on new roles and responsibilities that improve my resume and prepared me for future opportunities I didn't even know I wanted to pursue. So I tend to see change from a much more positive viewpoint now than I certainly did much earlier in my career. And when I launched my business in 2005, my goal was to provide virtual assistance services to small businesses, solo entrepreneurs, companies that needed admin support but maybe didn't want to hire that person full-time or permanently. I can tell you in January of 2005 when I started my business, I had zero plans for writing books or speaking at conferences or becoming a trainer. Had not crossed my mind. I would do training sessions for some of our local association chapter meetings, but it wasn't where I was headed from a career path perspective. I had a client ask me early in my business, what are you going to do when you get too busy to do this all by yourself? Are you going to hire people? And I said, no. I said, I'm not going to let that happen. I don't want employees. I don't want the headache. And he laughed at me, and it actually made me mad. I'm like, don't sit here and, ask me these questions and then laugh at my answer. But here I am 12 years later, and I've hired a team of people to support me. I was open to change, and because of being open to change and the needs of my clients and paying attention to what was changing in me with my personal interests and aptitudes as well, if I had resisted the changes that were happening in the economy and ignored the trends in social media marketing and tried to stay exactly where I was in providing virtual assistance, I would not be as happy and fulfilled in my work as I am today, and I know that for a fact. But so 12 years later, I've hired a team of people to support what I'm doing, and it has been a fantastic thing. And I now can see that I should have started my business with that kind of foresight, because it wasn't even reasonable to think that I could keep doing what I wanted to do at the level I wanted to do it by myself. And now I try to look ahead at things and ask myself, what am I going to do? What am I going to need to do to be prepared in order for my business to grow to the next level with the goals that we have in mind and some of the things we've set our sights on for what we want to be able to provide to you as administrative professionals with the training and the services and the resources that we provide. And now, even if it looks expensive or the process is unclear, my mindset coming at these things now is, who do I get involved to help us navigate this as efficiently as possible? Who can help me shorten my learning curve? And how can we make this as positive an experience as possible for all of us? And I can tell you, after going through the first experience of writing my first book, the second book went a lot smoother. And the only problem was I waited 4 years in between doing the first book and the second book. So we were a little rusty in a couple parts of the process. And getting the second book done, as soon as we finished the second book, I started the third book. And the third book hopefully will be out mid-fall, early to mid-fall. And the process that we are going through with the third book has been so much faster, so much more efficient, so much more enjoyable from the very start. And part of that's because we're getting better at navigating this innovation cycle and this change cycle that's involved in putting something new together. So that is why I am such a huge proponent of shifting some things in how you think about it, because you look at the next change as, okay, how can we do this one even better than the last one? And it almost becomes a little bit, for me, a little bit competitive with myself in making this one turn out as good as or better than what we've just completed. There are 3 things that will help you and your teams embrace change more proactively. And this is speaking from my personal experience with it as an administrative professional and now as a business owner and CEO of my company. And the first step is this: identify the change and its intended benefits from the start. And I say benefits because most change isn't because it's going to make something worse. So there are benefits to the change, but people need to understand what they are. So here's what I want you to think about and do, or ask your executive or ask your project manager to put in print for you, first and foremost, but then also to be able to share with the team and get everybody in alignment, even if they don't agree, at least help them understand we are changing from this, whatever that is, fill in the blank, to this, fill in the blank, because of what? Is it because it will increase something? It will decrease something? It will improve something? It will support our goal of accomplishing or achieving or completing, fill in the blank. This can make such a huge difference. And it also helps define what we're doing and why. That's your first starting point here. The second step then is to clearly communicate that plan, the progress you make along the way, and next steps throughout the change process. We all know that you rarely can over-communicate. So what is the plan for making it happen? You need an actual project plan, even for simple changes. What's the plan? What's step 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5? You know, are there sub-bullets that go with that? And I encourage you to identify specific phases of your plan. In project management terms, we're talking about some milestones along the way, because depending on how long the change takes, it can sometimes get really frustrating to think you're not making any progress. And so you need to have some mile markers along the way that you're tracking and measuring how far you've come and what you've accomplished, and celebrate some of those things as you go through it as well. And then with each milestone or each phase of this change plan, identify the specific actions that have to be taken in each phase. This gives you your actual tasks, and then you're assigning owners to them and start dates and due dates, and then you have something concrete to be following up on in your status meetings, your progress report details as you go through the change process. The other piece of this from a communication perspective is to identify who is responsible for leading the plan. Maybe that's you as the administrative professional. Maybe you end up being, you may have a champion for the project, but you may actually be the one who's leading the team through it. How will you track progress in attacking the plan? Is it going to be weekly calls? Is it a face-to-face meeting? Is it a web meeting so you can get virtual participants in a meeting room face-to-face using technology? Is it email updates or a project management tool? What is it that you're using to track, measure, and communicate your progress and next steps throughout the course of the change you're navigating? The third step is to celebrate the successes and appreciate the detours along the way. Absolutely celebrate your milestones. Those were the individual little phases you broke your overall project down into. Discuss the setbacks and detours so that you can learn from them as they're happening. Don't wait until the very end. I'm going to encourage you to do a debrief at the end also, but you're going to run into some roadblocks and setbacks. Talk about them as they occur and ask those questions that I said before. Who can help us get through this? Who can help us shorten the learning curve? Who do we need to get involved to course correct or put us back into a better spot for moving forward? And take notes and learn from those so that hopefully you can avoid future issues related to those same types of setbacks or detours that you encounter early in the process. And celebrate the completion of the change process as a whole. When you get done, this is where you have a great big party. Make it something that's enjoyable that everybody gets to participate in. And as a kind of a wrap up to this, I hate wrapping a project up without doing what I like to refer to as a post-mortem, a debrief and a discussion of what worked well and what could have worked better. And take notes and document them and make that part of the planning process in the next change that you initiate. And when you're done, update your system, your project plan for the next use. Now, I love the teamwork.com project management tool. And what I love about that is every time we use it for a project or a change or something new we're rolling out, we can put our plan together and plug it in from day one. As we go, we can keep adding to it. We can keep changing things. We can keep adjusting dates. When we're done, we can take that completed project or task list and turn it into a template and save it so that the next time we don't have to start from scratch. We can pull that one up, adjust it to make it fit as is appropriate for our new project we're working on, and it really shortens the setup process and the time involved in figuring some of those details out, especially if there's similarities between the things that we were working on. When my husband and I made our two-state move to Iowa, from Iowa to Indiana just a couple of years ago now, there were multiple positives to this move for us. We both wanted it. We were both excited about it. But I knew that there were going to be setbacks and detours that we would encounter throughout this process. If you've ever moved, even just within the town or city you live in, you know that that process all by itself is chaotic. Not to mention helping your husband get ready to research and pursue a new job opportunity, going through the interview process, finally getting hired, having to get your house put up for sale, coordinating the move in the busiest speaking month of the year for me, which also was moving my business wasn't a big deal because most of my work can be done from wherever I am at. So I can be relocated to just about anywhere and still not miss a beat. But it still did require getting some things handled for relocating my business from a legal perspective. So I told my husband as he began the job search process, listen, I am fully on board with this. I support you 100% in pursuing this, but we both need to recognize and understand up front that not every phase of this is going to run according to our ideal timeline or this perfect little plan that we had mapped out. And from what you've heard today, you know I'm a planner. So I had put a project plan together and I had it in OneNote, and I had gone through the process of cleaning out our basement and getting things donated to Goodwill, and had coordinated with the movers to get things packed, and I had mapped out the layout of our new apartment with all of our furniture measurements, so I knew exactly where everything was going to go when the movers got there and exactly where to tell them to put our furniture. Everything looked fantastic on paper, but I knew that wasn't probably going to be the way the execution of this thing turned out. I said, so our goal here needs to be that at each roadblock or detour that pops up, we stop, we analyze, and we troubleshoot it as efficiently as possible. And we need to avoid pointing fingers and assigning blame because I was pretty sure that I had forgotten a detail or two, even as thorough as I try to be. And I was pretty sure that there were going to be things he forgot to tell me in the process of communicating things back and forth. That's just the way things happen in life. I said, so we just need to figure out what we have to do to course correct and get back on track for making it happen. And I finished the conversation with this. I said, because when this is done, we both still need to love each other above anything else. And he laughed and I laughed, but that was true. And that's exactly what we did. And I do believe that having that conversation before we started helped both of us go into this move with a different mindset, which made an incredible difference when those roadblocks did occur. And they did. We had several of them. But my husband said to me, he goes, what was it you said? We just need to stop, pinpoint the issue, course correct, and get right back on track. And it worked. It's what we did. The other thing was keeping our eye on the goal. And one of those for me was knowing that these two little rewards were waiting for Aunt Julie on the other end, and that I was going to get to spoil and spend as much time on a daily basis instead of just a quarterly or biannual basis, which is the case prior to moving next door to these sweet little people. And that was some awesome incentive to keep me focused on the end goal as well. So when it comes to change, I want you to remember this. If plan A didn't work, the alphabet has 25 more letters, so stay cool. We live in a dynamic, changing world. What doesn't grow gets stagnant, and you do not want that to happen to your career. You don't want that to happen to the company you work for. You don't want that to happen to your industry. So learn to roll with change as it occurs and become a champion of change for yourself, for your executive, and for your company. Your career success is directly linked to your ability to be able to do that. I want to thank you for joining us for this month's program. We look forward to seeing you in class again next month. I wish all of you a very productive day. Thanks for being here.